Hello, welcome to State of Our Workforce Unpacked, where we'll dig deeper into the incredibly impactful work our network partners are doing across the country. My name is Henry Danner, and I'm the manager of network engagement at Shift Work Forward. Today, I'm joined by Linda Dworak, director of the Baltimore Workforce Funders Collaborative. Together, we're going to unpack the work of her group, which was featured in our recently released impact report, Breaking the Triple Bind: How Worker-Centered Solutions Are Transforming Childcare. Linda, it's really good to see you again. How are you?
Good to see you too, Henry. Looking forward to our chat today.
Me as well. I read through the impact report that we recently released. It featured four of our network partners, Baltimore being one of them, all with different variations of their childcare projects, right? And what I really loved about the Baltimore one was this whole motif of like setting the table and giving the childcare workers a seat at the table. I felt it was a great representation of what we mean when we talk about job quality. So I'm really looking forward to us unpacking that for our listeners and helping them to get a better understanding. So the first thing I would love for us to do, if you can, is just set the scene for us. We know across the country, communities are really struggling in different ways to improve job quality in the childcare industry. And a lot of times, the most impactful interventions are the ones that, just happen when multiple forces are converging at the right place and at the right time. So tell us what made Baltimore the ideal place for this project. And if you can add, like, what local elements help to propel ideas into action?
Okay, great. So I can start by saying that the Baltimore Workforce Funders Collaborators, we're a group of funders and a lot of partners in the workforce space in Baltimore. We have put for quite some time job quality and worker voice as two of the principles and sort of pillars of our work that we want to move forward. But when we came into this project, we had that those values and that desire to work in that space. But we hadn't really done much in the childcare sector. But I'm lucky enough to work alongside another group of funders in Baltimore that's focused on early childhood and early childhood well-being for children and systems around early childhood. And so when we came into this, we had those deep relationships in both workforce and early childhood. We have a robust community of partners in our community in the nonprofit sector and advocates and employers. And so, but in reality, there wasn't a lot of momentum around the topic of job quality for childcare workers at the time.
Mhm.
From a workforce development perspective, folks are always talking about how do we help individuals who are seeking to enter other fields and to get adequate childcare, because we know that childcare, access to affordable childcare, is a really important factor for many families in being able to access other careers and jobs. But we weren't really talking a lot about the childcare workforce, partly because workforce development folks tend to think of those as low quality, low paid jobs. And so it's not where a lot of energy was. And then for our partners that are really engaged in the childcare sector, they were talking a lot about the supply of childcare in Baltimore. In terms of, well, since like post pandemic, we've lost something like 2,400 childcare slots in Baltimore, and yet there's a growing demand for affordable childcare. And the state has put in a lot of work into something they call the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is an educational reform law that's doing a lot of things in the education system. But one of them has been expanding access to public pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds. So that increases demand. They also made some changes in the last 2 years under Governor Moore's administration to provide broader access to what we call the Child Care Scholarship in Maryland, which is the voucher, kind of child care voucher for families to get support, financial support for childcare. But then what happened was, as a result of expanded eligibility for the child care scholarship, there was expanded demand for childcare. So most of the discussions, I think, in the space were around how do we adapt systems to provide more public pre-K? How do we create more slots for childcare? How do we, create it's really a lot of issues around the supply of childcare itself. But there weren't a lot of conversations happening about the childcare workforce, which is predominantly in Baltimore, predominantly women of color. There weren't a lot of conversations happening around how do we ensure that the jobs for these really important educators, which we call the workforce behind the workforce, how do we ensure that those jobs are desirable, that folks want to be in those jobs, that they want to stay and retain, like stay with the work for over time, and with the so many job quality barriers that are in the sector, that's a real challenge. And you can't really improve or expand access to childcare or the supply of childcare if you're not talking about the needs of the women that are providing care to children. And moreover, if you want to talk about quality of care or quality of education, you can't really do that without thinking about the well-being of the educators who are in the classroom every day with the young children. If their personal needs aren't being met, if they're in very frustrating or under-recognized positions, it's really hard for them to provide the care, the relationship care to children that is the backbone of high-quality child care. So we started off with this opportunity to work in the sector around job quality without having a really specific idea of what that meant or what we could do. So we assembled a task force of local partners that included some childcare employers, some organizations that are support organizations to childcare entities, and we also had a few advocacy organizations, and we met with them over a period of months to kind of go back and understand the impact of job quality and understand, we looked at some different frameworks for what are job quality frameworks, what does job quality mean, is it just wages and benefits, or no, it's not. There's all of these other kinds of components of what makes for a quality job. And as a result of that, our task force really wanted to lean in to worker voice and agency. They recognized that one of the big challenges for the women in the childcare sector is they aren't seen and they aren't heard from, and they don't have a seat at the table to help move policy decisions or decisions that are made that impact their everyday work, that are made outside of their own control, often at the state policy level. That if they don't have a voice in those, then decisions get made that don't fit with what their needs are. So this group wanted to focus on agency and voice. It was kind of a surprise to us because going into it, I don't think that's where we thought we were going to put all our focus, but it became very clear as we work with our partners that that's where we wanted to go forward with the work. And that's what we did.
That is amazing. It sounds like you really just kind of met folks where they were at and like went with what surfaced as like a need. And one of the ways that I've learned that you all have done that is by um, using circles, a circle model to facilitate discussion with these childcare workers as a way to amplify their voices and expertise. Can you tell us a little bit about the circles, why you chose this model over, let's say, more traditional approaches like focus groups or surveys and things of that nature?
Yeah, so we really wanted to create something that was like authentic opportunities for the childcare educators to have voice and agency. We wanted to build the outcomes of like what we were trying to create into the model by which we used. And so it came to our attention that there was a parent engagement model by being used already in the country by a group called Nurture Connection. And we learned a little bit about that model and then approached them about, can we adapt this parent engagement model to a early child care educator model? And so Um, the way it works is that we helped build a number of peer-led, we call them caregiver circles. So they're peer-led groups of about 8 women and a leader that came together repeatedly over the course of several months. And so, and we worked with folks at the systems level, predominantly at the State Department of Education, Division of Early Childhood, and with we had a partner at the state superintendent's office, and we worked with them to kind of identify some systems level questions, and then we would bring those questions to these circles of women and ask them as peers to discuss the question and give us feedback. And over time, they then kind of created their own questions. So basically, it was an iterative way to engage with childcare educators. Each circle had a different flavor to it, I guess you would say. We had 2 circles actually that were all comprised of women who are predominantly Spanish speaking, and many of those were working informally in informal care. We had a circle that was just comprised of women who were working in childcare centers. Another one of women who were working in family care, licensed family care providers. So those are kind of centers that operate out of someone's home where they have children come and they're licensed and they're within the system. So we had each circle was a little different in terms of the type of childcare that it represented. And when we started, we weren't sure how we were going to find all the women for each of these circles, but we had peer leaders who went out and recruited their own members. So at the end of the day, we got feedback from outsiders who were like, I never thought you'd be able to. We've tried to survey the Spanish speaking providers in Baltimore. We've never been able to do it. And now you've got all these voices coming to the table. And that was because we really leaned in to the model of peer-led and peer recruiting.
That is so cool. From my experience, being in circles and facilitating circles is kind of formed on the basis of equity and everybody having a shared voice and a shared responsibility to the group, right? And
Yeah.
that can surface so much, right? It can surface so many thoughts, ideas, and opinions once you give people the space to lean into what they know. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, during those circle discussions, if you could share what is one policy or maybe program related issue that surfaced, and also what kind of solutions were proposed?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that, but if you don't mind, can I just jump back to one thing I would like to say
No
about just the
problem. Yeah.
structure that I think was really important? So again, we went out and recruited leaders for each of these circles, and they were all women who were actively working in the childcare sector, and we compensated them. We brought them all on as consultants. So none of this was just like voluntary. We tried really hard to build a model that wouldn't be extractive, but would be that would build skills, would build agency in and of itself through the model. So all of the leaders were brought on as consultants, and then we brought in we did a class with them about learning how to operate as a consultant. So they would have the financial tools to be able to manage that. And then all of the women who who as kind of participants in each circle received gift cards every time that they came to a meeting or participated. So we just wanted to recognize all along that these educators are the experts. We are not the experts. They are the ones who know what's happening. They are the ones who are experiencing it and living it, and trying to turn on its head the notion that the experts are sitting, in the Department of Education, or that the experts are at a university. They are the experts. And so we really tried to build that in throughout our process. So your question was, about what did we hear. So we started off with just trying to kind of ask them general questions about what mattered in terms of job quality, and what were they experiencing in their work. We asked them about um, the the state is considering a revision on what they call their quality measures. So that's not about job quality. It's like, how do you measure the quality or ensure the quality of a childcare center or a childcare business? So we asked them, like, what does quality care mean to you? And they talked about that. At one point, they came back and said, you're not even asking us the questions that we want to talk about, which was like a really awesome moment, because we were like, yes, they're like taking over and that's the way it should be. And so they came back and told us some of what they wanted to talk about. So to answer your question, a few things. When we kind of got to the end and we looked back at everything we'd heard, something that was really consistent was that the communicate like around communications. So the when policies or practices are made at the state level, they want to have a voice in how those are designed. So there's a lot of talk about, we want opportunities to co-design policies and practices that are put in place. We also want better communications with our state sector. So we want to hear, like, like any large state bureaucracy, there's a challenge in how you communicate with folks across the state. There was often, complaints about, oh, we're calling a number somewhere and get put on hold, or send an email and we never hear a response. All kinds of the typical challenges you might have with bureaucracy. So we heard a lot about wanting to find changes and pathways to make those communications better. We also heard um, oh gosh, there's so many things, but I would say, like, one of the second big themes that came out were around career pathways and licensing opportunities. So the way folks get information about and where the opportunities are to move along a career pathway in their work, like they didn't feel like they knew enough about that, or that the opportunities for support weren't there. And so and then the same with licensing, especially for the Spanish speaking women we spoke to, just felt like there weren't materials in Spanish. There wasn't anybody to talk to. There weren't classes in Spanish. So how do you professionalize? How do you grow without those opportunities? So those were kind of a few, there were many more, a few of like the top line highlights that stood out for me. And they dovetail with things that are moving in our state right now. So we have a state Department of Education, the Division of Early Childhood, that wants to make some of these improvements, who are looking at changes. There was a pause in our state's credentialing program. So there were career pathway opportunities that kind of got paused right during the time that we were running these circles. And so the information that was coming out of those circles can now be used by the state to begin to it kind of like provided a validation and impetus that, like, now these policy changes that are potentially happening at the state level can be informed by what they were hearing from out of the circles. And this also provides a lot of great opportunities for us moving forward into the next phase of our work.
Well, that's really amazing. I loved how you mentioned them, like, taking control and taking the onus, saying these are the questions we really want to, or the topics we really want to talk about, and um, handing over control. I think that that's super important to that whole process of what you all were doing. So I'm gonna get you out of here on one more question, and it's really just about looking ahead, right?
Mhm.
um it sounds like, based off of the impact report, which we know is from the first phase of our child care initiative, that you set the stage for some really cool things to happen with your project. And for a lot of reasons, when you're working at making systems level changes, there's lots of starts and stops. sometimes causing, a little bit of that momentum to be lost. So I'm just wondering, how do you all plan to keep up the momentum? What are you doing next? What are you planning, where you are planning to apply, what you've learned, to keep things moving forward?
Yeah, so I think like out of that first phase, there was all the learnings we got around the specific policies and job quality measures, but the maybe the most important learning is that you can engage the childcare workforce. You can engage the educators if you build an opportunity to make that happen. You and it makes a difference. And those women who participated, I would say, were they felt seen, they felt heard, and they felt valued, and that added to their job quality, right? So um, so we kind of learned that you can do this, and we learned that there's a real appetite for more participation. So as we're moving forward, we are seizing upon a few opportunities that are coming around to, again, to further develop opportunities for co-design of policy change. So we have two opportunities coming down at the state level where there are folks within the state of Maryland, within the governor's office, who are really committed to this concept of co-design and worker voice and are like really excited to work with us moving forward. They are looking at how to connect the broad range of financial supports that the state has to offer already that are being underutilized, are to find ways to connect those opportunities to the women who could benefit from them. And so we are looking to move forward to kind of build in a co-design worker voice using circles with the governor's office. And then there are similar opportunities right now with the state division of early childhood and with another group that's working with Latina childcare providers. So we're really excited because we think we developed a model that works well, and our next steps are going to be to apply that model more concretely to an actual set of initiatives and policy changes that are being made through the state or through other local partners. And so I'm excited for the next time we talk, because then I'll be able to give you more insight onto how that went and how we're going. But I think at the end of the day, if we can get more people to think about um, the importance of including the worker voice, the expertise from the childcare educators, and maybe it's not just about childcare educators. This is like a principle that applies across sectors. But if we can create structures that allow for voice to be a part of decision making. That's not just about like sitting in front of a microphone at a once a year testimony in the state capitol, but like really create co-design opportunities. I think we're onto something that can really make a difference. So, we'll see how it goes. We're still learning from this, and uh, it's an exciting moment to kind of really, as you said, about making equity opportunities real.
Hmm.
People want to be heard, they want to be recognized, and the women who are doing this work, they are so important, and the work they do is not easy, it's hard, and we all need it to happen. So the more we can recognize that and give them positions of power to help influence, then I think we're onto something that is really meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to give a big, big shout out to everybody that's a part of your project, especially those childcare workers and the circle leaders, and everyone involved. And to you, Linda, I just want to say thanks for joining us today. It was really good to learn more about the work you're doing in Baltimore with this childcare work. And um, I look forward to hearing how this next phase goes, and how you keep your foot on the gas. So thanks
Thanks.
again. Yeah, and I want to thank everyone who joined us today on LinkedIn. Please make sure to follow Shift Work Forward on LinkedIn and just stay up to date with everything we got going on from state of our workforce. Tune in for future episodes where we'll continue to explore the future of workforce equity with our network partners on State of Our Workforce Unpacked. So until then, see you soon.